Hi, everyone, and welcome to our IndieBio virtual space. I'm Julie Wolf, the Communications Director here at IndieBio's new program in New York. And this is our Fundamental Questions of Biotech series. We are going to have a wonderful conversation with our panelists today. And I would like to take a moment to just say hi and thank you to our panelists for giving an hour of your time. We know that you are all very busy people. So Whitney Snider is the head of Alexandria Launch Labs here in New York City and principal science and technology at Alexandria Venture Investments. Whitney, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Excited for the conversation.
Great. And Martin Graham is CEO of Empire Discovery Institute, also here in New York City. Martin, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me and be part of the conversation today.
No, thanks for the opportunity, Julie. Looking forward to the discussions.
As am I. And then finally, of course, I have to introduce my colleague, Stephen Chambers, who is Managing Director of IndieBio New York and partner at SOSV. So thanks, Steve, for spending another hour of the day chit-chatting about accelerators and startups today.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Excellent. So I've introduced you with basically your name and your title and the program that you're working with, but I think that everyone in the audience would like to hear a little bit more about your professional, your scientific, and your biotech background to our panelists. So I'm going to go round robin in that same order and ask you to introduce yourselves, as well as I think everyone would probably want to hear a little bit more about the programs that you run that some of our listeners might be interested in learning about. So Whitney, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, would you please introduce yourself with a little more details and color than I added with the intro?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Julie. Really a pleasure to be part of this conversation. So thanks for the warm welcome. Again, my name is Whitney Snider. In terms of background, I have an MD from Tufts Medical School in Boston and also an MBA from Harvard Business School. I spent the majority of my career in biotech. I worked at Celgene in business development. I spent some years in consulting at Bain & Company in the healthcare space. And then somewhere in between all of that, I did translational research at Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital in the Boston area. So a broad swath of experiences. Also spent a year in venture capital here in New York City before coming to Alexandria. And I think that's a nice transition to talk a little bit about Alexandria Launch Labs. And I'm so glad that, there are many regions represented on this call as our platform is truly national. So while our first site opened in 2017 in New York City, we have locations across the country in sort of major biotech clusters such as Seattle. We're opening a site at Stanford in San Francisco, Bay Area, we have a presence in San Diego. We have a footprint in Maryland, Greater Boston, Research Triangle. And then here in New York, we're really excitingly opening another Launch Lab site at Columbia. So happy to kind of elaborate on that during this discussion. At a very high level, before I pass it over to Martin, Launch Labs is really a multifaceted platform. It's much more than just move-in office space and laboratory space. It's really about, state-of-the-art equipment. It's about, first-class support that our team provides. It's about the services that we have on the ground and sort of the engagement with our network, both on the biotech pharma side and also with our investor network. So we really like to think of Launch Labs as having, 4 core components to our mission: access to capital through our seed capital platform, which I'll definitely talk about in this conversation, access to the world-class network that I described, company support and company building on the R&D and operations side, and then this ability to really scale from, a footprint in a space like Launch Labs, which is very modular and flexible as companies build teams, into really permanent long-term space, within our real estate offering. So really happy to, when things kind of settle down here in New York, provide, tours, of course, so people can really see the physical footprint. But I think, the wet lab space that we have and the shared equipment, the tissue culture suites, kind of all the breadth of offering really are so incredible to have access, for a growing company that is just getting off the ground with seed funding or Series A funding. So I'll stop there. Sorry for the long monologue, but many components that I look forward to sort of delving into today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, excellent. And it looks like you've got a background of Alexandria. Is that taken when you were back in the space?
It's a virtual background. This is on the wall in our Seattle site. And, each of our sites has unique elements really sort of bespoke to the different regions. And although I should be representing New York, this is just a favorite of mine.
Oh, it's very pretty. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Whitney. Martin, could you please give your background, your scientific background and your experience in biotech, and then also, of course, introduce Empire Discovery Institute.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Julie, for the introduction, and really looking forward to the discussion here. So I'm a pharmacologist by training, originally from the UK. Started out at the Institute of Cancer Research, where I did my PhD in London, and that was a drug discovery development unit, part of the Royal Marsden Hospital. A lot of early work there done with carboplatin development in the early days. So a really terrific place to kind of learn the drug discovery development industry. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for about 30 years. So from my kind of academic start in the UK, my first industry post was in Big Pharma with Sterling Winthrop. And then that kind of moved into to Sanofi, and moved from the UK to the US with Sanofi, and then after a number of years worked moving from small molecule drug development over into biologics with Johnson & Johnson Centocor for a number of years, and then moved from the kind of big pharma setting into the venture capital backed startup environment. Was with a number of smaller venture-backed biotech companies, Tetralogic Pharmaceuticals, one of them, with licensed IP from Princeton University, through the development of that company, almost to the stage of IPO with Tetralogic. And then after that, decided to go out on my own, founded a couple of companies prior to joining Empire Discovery Institute. So the most recent one was a company I founded about 8 years ago, Kinderpharm, which was a pediatric drug development company, which was acquired by Synteract about 2 years ago. And I'd say the last 7 years prior to joining EDI, I worked pretty closely on the scientific advisory board for the Harrington Discovery Institute, one of the very, I think, first kind of bridges between academia and the pharmaceutical industry in early drug discovery and development, and the partner organization, the commercial Accelerator Biomotive. So that kind of, I think, was really good experience for me personally before moving into my current role. So at the Empire Discovery Institute, I've been with that organization for the last 18 months. I joined just over in last April 2019. And EDI is a Western New York initiative funded initially through a grant of about $35 million from the state of New York, and quite a unique enterprise in that it's an accelerator that is working very closely with our three founding institutes, the University of Rochester, the University of Buffalo, and Roswell Park Cancer Institute. So we're kind of working actively with with faculty members there, the tech transfer office, to bring in, identify and bring in new technologies from those institutions into EDI, and really kind of bring about the next stage of development for many of these opportunities, kind of taking it through the early stages of kind of biotech development, ultimately to spin out companies with technologies that are successful, or partner those technologies once they've been adequately de-risked with pharma partners. So that's where I currently am. Happy to kind of explore, some more of the experiences, both with my kind of previous background and also with the kind of activities and programs we're establishing at EDI.
Yeah, very interesting. You're just giving your background. I have a question on whether you think an accelerator would work best for an academic or a serial entrepreneur, but we'll get to those more in-depth questions that we can kind of debate a little bit after. Stephen, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, giving a little background, and please introduce the IndieBio program as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. So like Martin, you can probably tell from my voice, I come from the UK as well. So I have a PhD in molecular biology. I worked in the biotech and drug discovery side of things. Like Martin, I cross both spheres of small molecule and also biologics. I've been mainly in startups in the US. That's been my home for the past 30 years. So I was one of the founding scientists at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Had a great ride there. Very interesting time, taking it all the way through from opening the doors to IPO and getting drugs approved by the FDA. So that was a very good learning experience of the whole entrepreneurial journey for startups to a fully integrated pharmaceutical company. I did another startup. I co-founded another company after that, Therapeutics, which was more in the antibody space. I did a number of companies after that, again in the US and also in the UK. I was kind of recruited back to the UK to work on their accelerator program that they had for synthetic biology. I was at Imperial College during that time. We had a very successful, huge number of companies came out of the research programs in the UK at that time. And then I came back to the US and started some more companies in the Cambridge, Boston area where I am now, and then ended up at IndieBio. So just to tell you about IndieBio, IndieBio has been going for about 5 years now in San Francisco. So we call it IndieBio San Francisco. It's been phenomenally successful with the model. Huge number of, I think it's over 200 companies have come out of IndieBio San Francisco. So successful were they that New York State said, we would like an IndieBio in New York. Hence we now have IndieBio New York, where we hope to replicate, if not surpass the success that IndieBio San Francisco had.
And clearly your background is also representative of New York there, right?
Yes.
Yes. Very nice. Very nice. Wonderful. So there, I've got a whole slew of questions, but let me first tell the panelists, one of the reasons I wanted to have this, this conversation is because we have here some entrepreneurs who successfully started therapeutic companies without necessarily having an accelerator. There, for many years, there have been companies that are building out their business model, and one could even make the argument that it is that there are so many therapeutics companies that have come out and trod the same path, that simply following the same type of get your, you do your drug screening, find your mechanism of action, then get your PK/PD, get together your IND package, that you don't necessarily need an accelerator, right? So I'm gonna play devil's advocate here and just ask, without how do accelerators help? Just ask, do accelerators help therapeutic startups? I will invite, let's say, Whitney, I see you've just unmuted yourself, so perhaps you would like to answer that question.
I would say definitively yes. Is it helpful to elaborate or just give my straight answer?
Yes, yeah, sure. Or add caveats if you feel like that is a necessary thing.
Sure. No, I think unequivocally, I think there is really an important element to the accelerator model. And I know there are many different flavors, but I think, at the heart is, this access to incredible shared equipment that I mentioned. Many companies, in order to accelerate their preclinical or even clinical development, just really have requisite, needs. And given that the infrastructure is in place and the ability to scale rapidly within that infrastructure and build a team, I think that's kind of a very, very unique way to be able to be continued very disciplined in use of capital, and spend it in kind of the right areas rather than sinking quite a bit into CapEx costs. So I think that's one element that truly, I think, is just so instrumental in the development of early stage companies that wouldn't otherwise have that access. Second of all, and then I'll stop there because the list is is long from my perspective. Obviously I want to share the floor. I think this idea of community and shared space, while at first many think, oh, I worry about it feeling competitive or feeling like I have to really keep things close to the chest, in kind of a shared environment. But what we found in Launch Labs that the key point of differentiation really is our community. I think in many respects, it feels like one team. And I think this is incredible for young developing scientists to have mentors at different companies and at all levels. I think that it promotes the sense of collegiality that many really enjoy, but in a team of three, you might not necessarily have the same sort of, community. And I think it draws in talent, and it allows for a lot of our teams to actually hire, because they're hiring into a very vibrant space and community that, is wonderful to come to work and allows for those sort of relationships. And we've seen this continue even through COVID, and obviously sort of like very much scaling back a lot of, the ways that our scientists engage. And they've been able to continue many of these interactions, I think, virtually. And I think, again, it's just provided another level of support, because it's challenging. It's challenging in New York. It's challenging in all respects to really, truly kind of get things off the ground. And so, I'll stop there. But I think the shared equipment, sort of very unique. And then the community is really a drawing aspect. So thank you.
Yes. Excellent answer. Martin or Stephen, do you have additional? So I think shared equipment is an excellent point, because that can be quite a large investment that you have to make in the company if you don't have access to that. And of course, the sense of community and being in a similar situation with other founders, even if you're working on different problems. Stephen, Martin?
Yeah, I would agree. I totally agree about the shared equipment and having access to equipment. Having done a number of startups without the benefit of an accelerator, I'd much prefer to use an accelerator, having to sort of, deal with numerous landlords and sourcing equipment and everything that goes on with that. And it's a huge drain on resources as well, before you have any product out. So you spend a huge amount of time, distracting time, really, to be perfectly honest, where your focus should be about working on the drug and the opportunity that you have in front of you. So I totally agree that that's one of the key benefits of accelerators. And as Whitney said, there are many, many more, but I'll leave Martin to pick up some.
Martin,
yeah, I think in terms of, if you're a completely new startup and you've never been exposed to the kind of entrepreneurial environment, clearly an accelerator is a tremendous resource to be able to engage and work with. But I think also if you've gone down this path before and you have experience and you maybe a serial entrepreneur, surrounding yourself with that network of people and experience. I think the biotech space is so broad, and small molecules, gene therapy, biologics, that it's difficult for often difficult for even experienced entrepreneurs coming into this space to really be fully versed in all the different aspects of biotech drug development. And I think often by having a resource like an accelerator that you can really engage with, you can really then tap into that expertise in a very efficient way to help move your company and your products forward. That doing it by yourself, I think, can be very challenging.
Yeah, the community aspect of it is really important, like whether it's a cohort or just the lab that you have working, the shared lab you have. Like the entrepreneurial journey, it can be very lonely. It can be fairly draining as well, kind of like emotionally. You're on a bit of a roller coaster. So having a community of other people that are going through similar things with you does help. Like there is a benefit in having surrounding yourself with other folks that are going through the same kind of thing that you're going through. And the other thing I would say is that, the other thing, accelerators are a relatively safe place to kind of discover both yourself and develop the opportunity. When you go solo, it can be quite, there isn't that support that you have within an accelerator. So, although accelerators, all of them are challenging, you will be challenged, they are much, much safer and much more, I don't want to say softer, but there is a sense of support around you that you can reach out to. So, that element of it, along with the community aspect of it, I found, especially having done it the other way, I found quite refreshing and very advantageous.
Yeah, and I think, sorry to chime in here with just two more points, Julie, before I'm sure you want to move to the next question. I think two additional things. So I think one thing I touched on a bit in the opening, but really this ability to scale, allows for flexibility in your own kind of burn rate and plans when you can know that you can add a few more people and you don't have to break a lease, sublease to someone else, the frictional cost of moving. I think that's a huge, huge benefit, being able to capitalize on this flexibility and buffer that, to kind of Stephen's point, allows for just a little bit of room to, kind of fail, try new things. I think it's hugely important such that energies, just to Stephen's point, aren't spent, really on the things that detract from the science and the focus there. I think that's just a critical point, a critical point to think about. And I think there are also, and this is the last point, I guess, I've seen some good network effects, coming from being in an accelerator. I think, there is a selection process, and so there are positive externalities there, along with the pure network itself. And I think we've kind of commented on that a bit in this conversation, the internal network, certainly from the community, but then also to the organization that you're going into, with the accelerator. Usually it's great to do diligence on kind of like, who are their connections? What do they try to promote as sort of, their source for, either investor connections or BD opportunities. I think that's really, really an important key too, because you're gaining some of the accelerators network in being part of it. So it can be a really positive thing as well.
Excellent. You guys are bringing up so many points that I want to follow up on, but I know we have limited time, so I am going to move on to the next question, which is whether there is an ideal stage of a company to look around for an accelerator program, to apply to a competitive program. For example, having a candidate compound. Is it important to know the mechanism of action? Is it important to have some in vivo data? Or, should you already have your IND package together and ready to apply, because that's the part where you really need some help and the road seems a little less clear. And I'm gonna pass it first to Martin, because I feel like working with institutions very closely, you probably work with many people who are coming directly out of a research lab and may not know this path, even if it has been trod before.
No, so I think early engagement is really very important. And I can kind of illustrate that, we've worked on a number of platform technologies where there may be multiple therapeutic avenues that you could go down with that particular platform to develop it through to clinical trials and commercialization. But I think having engaged with that external advice, within an accelerator early on to really do the due diligence on which of those pathways may be an optimal pathway for the development. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be, in the first instance, the most commercially attractive pathway. I think often we're kind of advising the groups that we're working with that in the first instance, it's really getting over that hump to demonstrate that the technology actually works and can be replicated independently. And you can reach a proof of concept early that is a kind of value creation point. And that often then will allow you at that point to maybe move into more commercially attractive routes of development. So I would say that early engagement is pretty important, so that you at the very onset, you're kind of setting yourself up for the maximum opportunity for success, and not going down a kind of rabbit hole of a development track that may not pan out to be the best way to go about it.
Right, that's excellent advice. Now I know, I don't know actually if this is common practice, but I know that there's tech readiness levels of like 0 to, I don't know, 9 or 10 that we use within our own system. And perhaps this is something you do at Alexandria or EDI as well. But I wonder if there's an ideal tech readiness level. And Steve, I'm going to pass this one to you, because we use this term or this phrase, that you would say like, oh, you know, we really think that someone should be at a 2. And now that might mean different things for different types of drugs, right? But what are your thoughts around that?
Well, obviously, you know, the more ready the tech, the more.
Well, I don't think anyone with a 10 is going to apply.
Well, no, it's 9. It only goes up to 9, so
yeah.
don't let's take it to 10. But personally, like the way we view it is that we look at everything. So, you know, maybe not a 1, but sometimes we do. You know, some of the ones that we do look at are very, very early stage. So we do look at very early stage. But I think probably that's the benefit of the accelerator, that all accelerators can, you know, it doesn't really matter where you are on the scale. Probably there's an ideal accelerator for you, depending where you are in terms of it. But I think accelerators are flexible enough to be able to deal with wherever the technology lands, to be perfectly honest. Like we would all like it to be more de-risked and, you know, the technology more mature, but that's not always the case. And, you know, life's not like that. We have to sort of deal with what we've got. So I think I'm just talking for IndieBio now, like we're quite happy to see technology readiness level, you know, 2, 3, like we look at them, you know, all the time. So, and take them on as well, as you know. So.
And Whitney, what are your thoughts on what stage, you know, and you could even talk perhaps a little bit to the fundraising stage, and where a company might be along its fundraising journey as well.
For sure. No, it's a great question. And I think one of the benefits, and I think Stephen hit the nail on the head, not surprisingly, you know, is really that there's probably an accelerator for you given your stage and given your focus and kind of the needs at the time. You know, for us, we really look at a spectrum of companies, and I think similar, you know, to most, it's really mainly about the trajectory. We really try to understand, you know, the preclinical or clinical plan and kind of, you know, the path to the next inflection point, and how the company, you know, plans to pursue that and build a team kind of against that plan. You know, so some of our companies are even pre-seed, but we think they have an incredible team and an idea where they really can prosecute it and can do so effectively in the space, you know. And at the end of the day, our hope is to help really accelerate companies that will tackle some area of unmet need in the biotech and life sciences space. So it's a broad mandate intentionally, such that we can really, really help, you know, do our part to catalyze great science, you know, that will translate to patients, you know, at some point. And so a lot of it really is specific to the company itself and how we get to know them and their trajectory. So there's a lot of thought that goes into application screening and diligence and getting to know the team. So it's hard to pinpoint, you know, a specific point that we think is truly the right sweet spot. And again, you know, we like seeing companies that are early and growing. We love seeing companies that we think are approaching the clinic and a major fundraise that will kind of take them to a permanent home within Alexandria. That being said, the mix is really important too. You know, having a mix of companies that are growing and companies that may sort of graduate, you know, sooner rather than later is just a positive to keep that feeling of momentum that I think is, you know, one of the benefits we talked about in the first question. So, you know, I think it's a really good point. You know, and on the fundraising side, we do like to see that companies have the requisite funds to kind of reach that next inflection point. That's important. But some of the companies are, you know, have SBIR funding and some angel funding. Some have very serious Series A, again, it's just correlating the level of funds with the plan and the work they would like to do, you know, within launch labs. I think a really important thing is, as you think about an accelerator, is understanding their criteria for growth, if there is any, in their timeline, just setting expectations. Each program has, you know, its own sort of thoughts on, you know, the sweet spot of time spent. And so that's probably where I would just make sure that the dialogue is very open, such that you know and have expectations, sort of what the right timing will be for you, and what the, you know, team that's helping support on the accelerator side expects you to kind of get to. And so I think, again, it's a flexible structure, but sometimes over communicating on kind of goals and where you hope to go really sets, you know, everyone up for sort of optimal success.
Whitney, thank you for teeing up my next question so excellently, because that is exactly what I wanted to talk about. It's clear that that we on the accelerator side might do due diligence on those that are applying to work with us, but all three of you have mentioned finding the right accelerator program for the founder team, for the company, right, to get them to that next inflection point. Now, obviously, the internet exists and people can use Google, but there are probably additional ways that people can find out whether an accelerator program fits their particular needs. So can you, I mean, let's make this real inside baseball. Can you give some hints as to how people might be able to figure out whether they should apply to which accelerator? And again, I'm just going to kind of leave it open to see if anyone's got any inside tips that you're willing to share.
Well, there are a huge amount of accelerators around the globe. Like it as part of the innovation ecosystem globally, there are thousands of accelerators. You know, some good, some bad, obviously, with those kinds of numbers. I think, you know, what I would look for is, if I was looking for something, would be specialization. I think that's probably the key that you need within an accelerator. Some of them tend to be generalist or will be techie or software. I think you really do need one that has a focus around a particular sector. That's my feeling, because then what they bring is they bring that ecosystem that they are familiar with, whether it's advisors, mentors, domain experts, you know, the expertise that they bring, that will be concentrated in the accelerator. So that would be my first pass with accelerators. And then obviously there's as has been said, like, you know, all accelerators have a, you know, different price point, different amount of time you spend in the accelerators, and different expectations as well. That's my contribution to that.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and I think maybe I can hop in here. So, you know, I think EDI and the accelerators I've kind of had experience working with, we're really focused in a very kind of early opportunities, emerging technologies that are coming out of academia. I think our starting point is, you know, we're not working on basic science, but we want to have a tangible starting point. You know, that would be the basis of developing a drug development program around that. So we're pretty agnostic into the stage of development. But I think there's, as you know, programs mature through that, these kind of programs, for example, the Harrington Institute that kind of previously had experience working with are a very early stage academic industry accelerator over the first kind of 2 years of funding. But as programs mature and there's an opportunity for them to transition into later stage accelerators, Biomotive being one of the kind of partner institutes that can take that program further downstream with additional kind of investment capital, different kind of expertise to draw on to take it through that next stage of development. So I think there's a whole spectrum of opportunities there that can be sought out that would take some very early technologies and then also be able to advance and commercialize much later stage opportunities.
Excellent. So speaking of those later stage opportunities, one thing that I think many people who are making the transition, mostly for the first time, but I imagine if you depending on the stage of companies that you've worked with in the past, perhaps a serial entrepreneur, might not have the network necessary to get to the manufacturing side of things. Because of course, not only figuring out how a drug works, what its mechanism is, all those things that we were talking about before, but then how do you get it to clinical grade? And so how is as an accelerator able to perhaps move this along faster? No one's going to say accelerate, but that would be too much accelerator. How would an accelerator be able to move that process along a little bit faster than, let's say, people who are doing this on their own?
I'm happy to jump in quickly there.
Please.
You know, we really pride ourselves on keeping, you know, a somewhat curated list of partner network counterparts that we work with, you know, whether, you know, in all stages of drug development and all resources you could think of. And in many cases, we try to secure, you know, strong relationships and discounts for our member companies to help in their sort of growth. And so, you know, I think that having that buying power to some respects can really help accelerate some of the relationships, whether it be with CROs or other vendors, you know, whether it be with a platform like Carta, for example, you know, to think about cap table management and data room access. So it really runs the gamut from true research and development tools to also just, you know, necessary company building tools that will help you in your financing or whatnot, which then, you know, cyclically, of course, helps in the development of your work. So.
Wonderful. Steve or Martin, would you like to add anything?
I think just having access to that network, and there's usually a lot of experience out there that can be brought through that network on, you know, external CROs and companies that have worked well, some that may not have worked out as well, and that experience, I think, is really invaluable, can be shared with a new company and help them kind of navigate the system more rapidly, potentially, you know, by benefiting from that kind of that experience within the network group.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, networks are one of the benefit, but the companies are truly owned by the people who have founded them, right? The accelerator does not do the work. So how does that network contribute to, let's say, finding clinical partners or, you know, people who are KOLs within that space? Is that a place where an accelerator would be able to help, or is that something that really the founders need to, you know, hustle, find the experts in their field, perhaps be working already, have them on their advisory board? What are the thoughts there?
Well, at least within IndieBio, like it's a mix. Obviously, you put the onus on the founders and the management of the company to do you know, a lot of the heavy lifting. But you know, at least in the case of IndieBio, like we do support them very strongly in terms of opening up our network and introducing them to you know, the kind of the network that we have, whether it's in, you know, basic R&D or in CMC or in, you know, preparing an IND. So that's, you know, like we do a certain amount, but it's what we try and do is, you know, give 5 introductions and then push them to make, you know, get 10 introductions. Like we, you know, part of it is kind of pushing them and challenging them to sort of, they have to establish their credibility within their own network. Like we can help them, but we can't take them all the way. So it's a bit of a carrot and stick thing that you've got to do. So that's how we function.
I think that's incredibly well said. Definitely a bit on both ends, a bit of push and then a few sort of intros as possible. And, you know, we have some incredible partners with our academic institutions and key PIs and other thought leaders, and certainly, you know, take very seriously opening our network to our entire platform. And that, again, is one of the points we really try to promote. We try to share kind of our mission. That being said, I agree with Stephen. You know, the onus at the end of the day really kind of falls on the entrepreneur to then catalyze and take that relationship and really sort of, you know, bring it to bear. So thanks.
Yeah, I think my experience is that, you know, a lot of the founders are real domain area experts and have a real expertise in those therapeutic areas. But as you're kind of developing the company and as you're moving a program down into clinical development, going through the regulatory pathway, that's sometimes where the gaps can be, and I think supplementing that with experts that you can bring in and introduce, KOLs in certain of these other areas that are kind of essential parts of the jigsaw to put together an effective package for a submission and commercialization effort.
I just want to say about New York specifically, like what we found, obviously, like we're new kids on the block here, but we found that the mentor network that we've plugged into has just been amazing in terms of domain expertise and breadth of knowledge. So, like there's no lack of kind of people that will help. And what's always amazed me about mentors and advisors is that, often this is all done just because they like doing it. They just like interacting, which is, I always find incredible. So the New York ecosystem is really strong in capable and knowledgeable mentors. So it's something, that New York should be very proud of, I think.
I agree. And Steve, you're one step ahead of me because I did want to talk a little bit, even though we have an audience full of people who are found around the globe, I do think that there's an important emphasis on New York and the opportunities here. So thank you for that. And I wonder if Whitney or Martin, you guys would like to speak about right now, the clear need. I think everyone in the audience understands the importance of biotech in producing new molecules at very rapid paces, right, based on our experience with COVID-19. But I think that there's a special opportunity in New York, and I wonder if you'd like to say something to that.
Or Martin, feel frey to start, and I can jump
in.
No,
I think you're absolutely right. I think particularly things like the current pandemic have really, I think brought it's a real crucible of activity that's been kind of catalyzed by these events. I think in general, there's within the New York ecosystem, there's a very vibrant biotech community that's growing and evolving. I think in the western side of the state where EDI is located, that's traditionally been an area I think that could have benefited from some of the activities that EDI is now kind of trying to open up and bringing in expertise and capabilities to the institutions in that region. So we're working, I think, across the state to grow the very vibrant biotech community and pulling in the expertise and capabilities to be able to support a lot of these new entrepreneurial enterprises that are starting up.
Yes, and we've had some wonderful interactions on the IndieBio side with accelerators, not only in New York City, of course, they've been very welcoming, people like Whitney, but also with Martin, folks like you at the EDI and around the state. So thank you for that. Yeah. Whitney, would you like to speak to the opportunities here in New York? I saw that you had unmuted yourself.
Definitely. No, thank you so much. It's a good cue. Personally, so I grew up in Boston and obviously, well aware of the incredibly vibrant ecosystem there. And I think, New York shares so many of the same elements, incredible academic institutions, great NIH funding, certainly a tremendous amount of capital in New York City. And so some of it is really bridging the gap and helping translate companies. New York doesn't have quite the presence of venture creation, shops, so to speak, venture firms that really kind of shepherd a company from its inception through, all stages of financing. And I think that infrastructure is really, really helpful in developing a lot of technologies in the Cambridge area. Stephen, of course, can comment, in a much more sophisticated way even than I, just given all of his firsthand experience. But that being said, I think therefore, the accelerator model is so critical, especially in New York City. As I mentioned, Alexandria started the first launch labs here in New York, really seeing this need for, partnership with companies translating out of academia to help provide some of the infrastructure and resources and, kind of supplant some of the capital that may typically, in the Cambridge area, come from, a very deep-pocketed venture investor and, provide the infrastructure, this sort of network, the connections to resources for first-time founders who are really thinking about, setting up everything sort of de novo, whether it be, even just the back end and incorporation element of their company. So I think in New York, there's tremendous opportunity. I think, clusters are built over time, and, we are sort of in the building phase, but I remain incredibly bullish. We have engaged with so many of our New York stakeholders over the past months just to check in to see how things are going, from their perspective, whether it be our investors or academic counterparts, our own scientific founders, and many who were here before are really, positive on kind of the trajectory. And so I think the accelerator model plays a really seminal role, especially in areas like New York City. So, I think very positive there. And I think, New York, we're excited sort of for what will come. And I think my last point here is really around, our pressing need collectively as a community in New York to help develop great talent. We see kind of the up and coming stars as the soon to be, first time CEOs. And so, it's really upon us, I think, in the ecosystem to really help, build that pool of talent that I think will then really help catalyze the next generation of companies. So we take that, wholeheartedly, and really appreciate partnership with IndieBio and other institutions to be able to, really band together to help provide the infrastructure, in a somewhat customized way. Because I think we've talked a lot today about, there's a model for everyone, and it's not a one size fits all. And so together we can help kind of champion a broader swath of new leadership. So, I'm very energized about it, and, remain very optimistic.
Wonderfully said. And actually, I'm going to follow up with a question from the audience for you, Whitney, about this. Maybe you could just very briefly say the status of Alexandria and Columbia, and if there is a relationship with Columbia there in continuing the New York.
Yes, I'll be brief. And I, welcome anyone to come to our website or contact me directly. So Alexandria Launch Labs at Columbia is up on the Columbia Medical School campus on Broadway, in the Lasker building. It's comparable size to our Launch Labs footprint on 29th and 1st, and a similar format with, shared equipment and incredible access to the same sort of network. It is affiliated with Columbia in some respects, but we're opening applications to all institutional affiliations. So I think we really encourage people to apply. The doors open in January, and I'm really glad. Thank you to whomever lobbied in the question, because I was hoping to bring it up at the right time point. So we're excited to expand the footprint in New York, and we think it will be really great to have a touch point up on the campus.
Excellent. And I hope that everyone in the audience is now considering moving to New York, because clearly we're all huge advocates of the state. Now, I'd like to revert back to some of the benefits of working with many different companies over a long period of time. I think that one thing this does is to give the teams working at accelerators some of the common mistakes that are made over and over again, and allows not direction, but advice to early stage founders. So perhaps I'll pass this over to Martin to answer. What are some of the common mistakes that you have helped people to avoid by learning through others' experience time and time again?
Yeah, and going back to a point I made earlier, I think picking the right development path early on, I think is really a critical thing to try and get right very early on in the stage, so that you set the right trajectory there to meet goals and metrics that you can set up certain objectives to get to proof of concept. So I think, to me, getting the right development plan in place early is really important. If you don't get that right, you can really often be kind of going in the wrong direction and find there's a lot of challenges downstream that you didn't anticipate that can be, in some cases, catastrophic to the program.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because I know that in many accelerators, not in the for companies not in the therapeutic space, that there's a lot of customer discovery, right? But you can't call clients or patients and say, how do you like this drug, right?
Yep.
So the business development becomes more along the lines of how will the drug be used or what patient population. And I imagine that most places such as the EDI have that expertise.
And that's an important part of what we're doing as well, is I think when we're evaluating programs to bring into EDI, one of the very early things that we're doing is very much a market back approach. So part of our due diligence is really looking at the commercial opportunity, the competitive environment, the regulatory environment, and bringing those kind of components back into not just our kind of evaluation of the science and the innovation, but seeing where it fits within all these other considerations when we're making our picks on the programs that we want to support.
Excellent. Whitney or Steve, would you like to add perhaps some common mistakes that you advise people to either avoid making in the future, or the things that you have seen, just observed through experience?
So I totally agree. I totally agree with Martin about the development path as he phrased it. I often think, like, I see an awful lot of companies that are potentially picking the wrong clinical indication. Like we saw that in our past cohort, and we're able to correct it successfully. But it's picking the wrong indication is kind of like probably where we can make almost like the most impact with companies, where they go down a path which probably isn't the right one. The other kind of like personal kind of bugbear that I have with companies, not just therapeutic companies, but is staying in stealth too long. They want to sort of, they don't want to talk about the technology and what it will do. They're kind of, in stealth mode, and they won't engage with, customers and partners and until everything is perfect. And we're constantly encouraging them to go out. Obviously, once you've got the IP sorted out and everything is bolted down, but get out and start talking to people. And that kind of like leads me back into often they pick the wrong clinical indication and just all the other things that come with that. That's
excellent. Yes, I can see how those are very related. Whitney, please.
I think those are two incredible points. So I'll kind of pivot to another point, mainly in a specific setting, kind of on the investment side. We've seen a lot of companies have good conversations with certain venture groups or investors and, go down a path of diligence to receive kind of an answer that is no. And from there, we've seen companies sort of just kind of, then write off and say, okay, this investment group or venture group or whomever is really not interested. And so, I think the piece of advice I would have really is to, a no can be a no at a certain time, but staying and keeping those relationships, even sort of lukewarm through, updates, not in a pestering way, but even, once a quarter, just saying, hey, we're making great traction. We're starting to evolve some of the data that answers some of the questions that you had in your diligence. Would you let us know when, we could reconnect in sort of a non-intrusive but way that really keeps that connection going? Because we found that, if you've had a few conversations, but it's not the right time, there's probably some interest there. And so, maintaining that sort of careful balance of not being too pestering, but really keeping on someone's radar. When done right, we've seen it really work out in tremendous ways. And, personally, on the venture side, for Alexandria, many of the investments we've made, we've been talking to, a company or a founder for, a year, 2 years before, and then it becomes the right time. So, building the rapport, and sort of getting to that point can be really helpful. And it's hard not to get discouraged by a no, but sometimes it could be a yes later. So I just want to put that out there to balance the other points too.
An excellent point. Well, we are almost out of time, so I'm just going to ask it's a question that could go long, but I'm going to ask you to keep your answers short so that we can get to everyone. And that is, when you are evaluating the founder or founders, if you're looking at the team, what characteristics outside of the science, let's say, do you really look for that would say this is a good fit for our Accelerator program? Martin, I can see you nodding, so perhaps you've got.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really, that's a really important factor that we're looking at. Is this somebody that we can work with? Is the communication open? are they in some, are they coachable? I mean, I think a lot of the the folks that we want to work with at EDI, we want to be able to have really good interactions with our advisory board and be open to suggestions and direction where appropriate. So I think we're looking for those kind of important kind of people skills and characteristics there that we know will facilitate the working relationships.
Right, of course. Steve, what do you think in a founder, assuming that the science looks good, right, like due diligence, what are the characteristics that you think make for a good candidate?
I'd echo what Martin was saying about coachability. I'll tell you bad characteristics. So, it's okay. Overconfidence, it's arrogance, it's lack of transparency, dismissiveness. It's all those things. That's kind of like the bad ones that you want to avoid. And I think if you can talk to your founder and have a relationship with them, because this isn't going to be 4 months. This is going to be 5 years if you're lucky. So this is, this is going to be a long-term relationship. So you need to have a connection with them. You need to be able to want to spend time with them. And most importantly, you need to be able to communicate and talk to them.
Excellent. Yes, I like the opposite or the negatives. That also helps. Whitney, what are your thoughts on founder characteristics?
Yeah, I would definitely echo both points that have been made. Certainly, the sort of humility and sort of recognition that coming into the program, there's benefit on both sides. And I think, sometimes, I really kind of judge the relationship based on how a lot of my team is sort of treated. We do provide a lot of operational support. We have an incredible team. And most of the team, even in doing administrative tasks, have a strong biology background and some level of expertise. So I always am sort of wary when I see someone who, is quite demanding on the team, because, I think sometimes it reflects a leadership style, but I don't know. Anyways, that's a little bit more anecdotal. I think that Martin and Stephen really hit the true important characteristics on the head, for sure.
Well, we are right at the hour, and I think this has been a very excellent conversation. I want to thank all three of you so much for your insights and for taking the time to, have this conversation, which was, we hope, very useful to you in the audience and has inspired you to move to New York so you can come to one of our accelerators. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you so much, Julie. Great speaking with you.
Yes, it was really wonderful. I was very pleased all three of you could join us. I would also like to say thank you to Alexander Hall-Daniels, who I often forget to thank, but really keeps this show running here at IndieBio in New York, is in the wings here. And thank you, our audience, for listening. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.